Today, we'll have Pastor Ashley Shook from Hillside Community Church, and then we'll have a discussion on expressions of love.
Man Up is a series that challenges men to become strong, unique, discipled followers of Jesus. Hosts Troy Ferguson, Brent Zimmerman, and Victor Thomas. Welcome to Man Up.
Hello. I was thinking how God is always a part of our life. He's always doing something new. Some people feel uncomfortable when they face new situations, maybe a new job, moving to a new city. And sometimes people have the propensity of complaining instead of going to God and asking, what is it you're trying to do in my life? I'm reminded as a child, I used to enjoy going to the circus, and one of the favorite acts that I enjoyed was the trapeze artist. But I noticed how sometimes the woman, when she would have to leave one bar to go to the next, she was in mid-flight. Sometimes when we do new things and we're stretched beyond our comfort zone, it looks like we are in flight. But take heart, because God is with you in those situations. And instead of complaining, go to Him and ask, Lord, I know you're with me. What is it you want to get out of this situation? You see, God is going to stretch you beyond your comfort zone sometimes. And that's when the rewards will come in your life and God will be pleased with your life. So if ever you're in doubt in a new situation, and I know it feels uncomfortable, that is a time to go to prayer with God and ask God, join me in this situation. And trust me, He will be there for you. He never abandons you and He won't fail you. Stay tuned for this edition of Man Up.
When it's time for a new roof, Champion Roofing is your best choice. We're a certified award-winning roofing contractor, meaning your roof is done right the first time. Call today.
Champion Roofing, we're the solution.
Welcome back. We have today my friend and my brother, Pastor Ashley Shook. Hey, welcome. Hey, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, I am currently the senior pastor at Hillside Community Church. We're one church with 3 locations, Bellwood, Juniata, and Tyrone. I've been this lead pastor of the congregation since July of 2018, and we've been just blessed to be part of the faith community that God has brought us to here in central Pennsylvania. I became the pastor because my best friend from college, and he was the best man at my wedding, his father was my predecessor.
Okay.
And he was getting ready to retire. And at the time, I was an administrator at a private Christian school in North Carolina. And so my friend, he called and said, I know you're not in the ministry anymore, but are you interested in maybe being a pastor? My dad's about ready to retire, and we're looking for someone. And so, long story short, I left the warmth of North Carolina and came to the chilly area of central Pennsylvania. But I'm originally from western Pennsylvania. I grew up between Pittsburgh and Erie, and huge Steeler fan, of course, growing up in that area. I grew up in a small farming community in western Pennsylvania. My town, the entire town, had 350 people in it.
Wow.
And I think there were more cows than people in my hometown. And so I grew up in a community that had a really strong work ethic. I grew up in a family that was a good family. Mm-hmm. My parents were really good parents. However, I did not grow up in a Christian home. And one of the things that I struggled with as I grew up on the farm and in my family was my dad just never seemed to be around for me. And so as I grew up, I wondered if my dad even liked me, let alone loved me. And so he worked really hard. He was a coal miner, of course, had the farm, and he was farming and all of those things. But it was just strange to me that my dad would never come to my baseball games. He never came to basketball games, anything like that. And so, like I said, for a long time, I grew up wondering, did my dad love me? And I graduated high school. I still wasn't a Christian at the time. I went off to college to actually become a nurse and graduated from nursing school. And it was as I was graduating from nursing school, a friend of mine shared the gospel with me. And I just remember praying there in the summer of 1993, asking Jesus I was going to repent of my sin. I was going to turn my faith to Him. And so then I began to feel God's call to go into ministry. and I traveled to Lancaster Bible College out in eastern Pennsylvania. And when I was there, I'm still wrestling with some of the stuff because I would be in classes and they would talk about how God is my father, and it was just a disconnect for me at the time. Until I read a book that had just been published a few years earlier in early to mid 90s entitled The 5 Love Languages. And I started to read that book and I realized that my dad and I were communicating love differently. And it was for the first time in my entire life, I was 23 at the time, first time in my entire life that I realized my dad did love me. It just was communicated in a way that I could not hear it.
Right.
And so we were speaking 2 different languages there. And so my love language is quality time. We don't have to really do anything, just I feel loved when people are sitting down with me. And so my wife gets frustrated with me. She gets up and goes to the kitchen and I ask her, hey, where are you going? She said, just to the kitchen. When are you coming back? Don't worry, I'm coming back.
Well, we're sitting down with you. Do you feel loved?
I feel loved.
Yeah, I was thinking the same thing right now.
And my dad's love language is acts of service. And so he communicated his love to his family because he was going to be at work, he was going to work hard, he was going to provide for us, he was going to do all of those things. And so for the first time, like I said, I realized my dad did love me.
Sure.
And he provided for me. He was paying my tuition so I could go to college and all of these things. And it really transformed the relationship that I had with my father. And realizing that we're all different, we all communicate that a little bit differently. And today, I go back to my dad's place and I help him out. He still has cows on the farm, so I help out with all that. And when I leave after doing all those things for him, he'll say to me, I love you so much, only because I'm communicating his love language by acts of service in order to help him. And so it's been a really great relationship with him. My mom passed away in 2020. They'd been married for 51 years. And so I had the opportunity even then, as my mom's health was declining, at the kitchen table, I was able to lead my dad to the Lord. And so he's been a believer now for 5 years. And so it's nice now that I can have that time in which I can communicate spiritual things with my father that I never had my entire life growing up. And so even though it was tough growing up, I don't think I would change it because God has revealed a lot of things. I've learned a lot of things through that. And I think now my relationship with my dad is at a place that I don't know if it ever would have been had I not gone through those things as I was growing up.
You know, Pastor, you had talked about some of the experiences you had growing up. Many times as kids, we don't always understand the expressions of love from our parents. And on this show, we talk to a variety of people that have not had a father, not a father figure, I'll put it. So you actually had someone that was there, but not necessarily giving the love and affection that you desired. How did that shape you as a child, having a present father, but in a sense, not giving what you needed?
How that impacted me was that I always tried harder. Because I thought, if I perform better at baseball, maybe Dad will come to the game. Or if I do better in school, maybe my dad would, show up for those things. And so for me, it became this never-ending cycle of just trying harder and harder, trying to be perfect in everything that I had done. Because I thought that if I could just do that, then my dad would be proud of me. My dad would then show that love to me.
Gotcha.
Pastor Ashley, let me ask you this, to build on what Troy said. Now, how did that translate, your experience with your father, how did that affect you, or what did you do differently in parenting? Because I know for me, you and I are in the same boat as far as our fathers go. My dad was a hard worker. I didn't get the affirmations. I didn't get the hugs and all that stuff, So it did, for me, it kind of pushed me into giving my kids more hugs, making sure they did understand the love and being there for their games. So how, for parenting for you, what was that like?
Well, for me, going into it, because I had made this great revelation in my life earlier, my wife and I, we got married and started having children. And I just made this conscious effort to say, all right, I'm going to spend time learning my children, their personalities, how do they receive love best, and just tailor the way in which I raise them and father them specifically to them. I mean, oftentimes we just try to have this blanket instructions on how to raise children. And our children are each unique, you know.
Right.
If you have children, if you have more than one child, you realize that they grow up in the house, they have the same parents, that do the same thing, but these children are so much different from one another. And so what do I have to do with this? What do I have to do in order for this child to hear the love that I have for them? And it's going to be probably completely different for the next child. And so spending that time knowing them, like I said, their personality, their love languages. And so I'm a huge proponent on that.
So how did you recognize that? Because most parents will group all the kids into one. This is how we're going to raise our kids. Amy and I recognized that right away. Kevin was different from DJ, so on and so forth. And, you know, down the line, we had to discipline them differently. We had to address their situations differently. How did you recognize that? Was it just like instinct, or?
No, it was trial and error.
Oh, gotcha.
And so our children, we have two children. They're 4 years apart. And so our daughter, she was very compliant early on and all of those things. My son is too much like his father. And
I got 5 of them like that.
so I realized early on that the way in which we were going to have to discipline him, because the way we disciplined our daughter was not going to work with him. We tried it and learned that that wasn't going to work. And so we had to learn those things, like I said, by trial and error as we were raising them.
That's wonderful, because most people don't recognize it. It's like, it's my way. I'm the man of the house. You know, I'm glad to hear that you recognize that and was able to adapt to that.
Yeah.
When you expressed it, the 5 love languages, we're going to actually get into the next segment with some of that as well. But you said yours was quality time. So whenever you want to show either a child, a spouse, someone from the church love, what's your first instinct of how to do that?
Well, I mean, that's my first instinct, because that's natural to me. One of the things that Dr. Smalley, the point that he makes in the book is that all of us have to learn how to be bilingual, okay? And my wife's love language is words of affirmation. And so I know that every day I've got to just continue to reiterate to my wife through words, I love you, I love you, I love you, send her text messages throughout the day and things like that. And so naturally, yeah, we want to speak our love language, but understanding that not everyone receives that. And that's where it sometimes gets a little bit tricky, especially as a pastor, because, you know, you got hundreds of people here that you're trying to minister to, and everyone's going to be different, everyone's going to be unique, and so it is sometimes difficult to do that in a professional role as a pastor.
Yeah, I get that.
You know, there was conversation about children and raising them differently. Now, as the lead pastor, what core values at Hillside Community Church do you guys teach to children about the love of Jesus?
Well, first of all, the very first important thing is helping them to recognize that we by nature are sinful people, and we need to make that change in our life in which we repent of our sin and turn and trust Christ. Then, of course, we build on that. What does it mean to live a godly life? What does it mean to be obedient to the things that God has asked us to do? How are we to be the people of love that God has called us to? And so we try to make the things very practical for our youth and help them to understand really how to live out the faith in a practical way.
That's real good. And as Troy said, we're going to continue this discussion. We have to pay the bills. Can you stick around?
Yes.
Okay. We'll be right back on Man Up.
This segment is brought to you by Harry's Construction, whose motto is, "If you can dream it, we can create it." They are the kitchen and bath design experts, so call Harry's Construction for all your remodeling needs.
Next time on Let's Talk About It, we will discuss what a perfect day looks like to us. And then later we will have Suzanne Cox join us via Zoom to share her incredible love story.
Many bad situations in my life. Became an alcoholic at about 16 and a cocaine addict by 23, and my life had spiraled out of control from a very early age, and so I ended up in treatment centers.
All that and more next time on Let's Talk About It.
Welcome back. Now, in our last segment, we delve a little bit into the topic of these love languages. I wanted to look from the perspective of Dr. Gary Chapman's book, The 5 Love Languages. Troy, could you chime in on that?
Yeah, so this would be a great discussion. You know, sometimes men don't like to talk about love languages and so forth. This is something that women are off, but I think it's great for us. Here again, man up, we're stepping up. In the book, Gary Chapman discusses 5 different love languages. One is words of affirmation. Second is quality time. Third is receiving gifts. Fourth, acts of service. And the last is physical touch. Now, we're not going to be able to get into all the details of all of these.
Right.
But when you think of, and as we just talk about this, when you think of expressions of love, whether things that you've received or how you give love, our nature is to give what our expression is. And our wife or our kids may not have the same love language as he mentioned in the previous segment. So what are some of the ways that we can effectively love our family, love others, based upon understanding there's 5 different categories, so to speak, of love languages? What do you guys think?
You know, let me say this, because it's important that you find what your love language is and find the love language of that person that you are trying to connect with, whether it's a wife, family member. It's analogous to someone who may speak only Spanish trying to translate to somebody who speaks only Chinese. There's going to be that communication barrier. But as Pastor Ashley had alluded to, once he understood his father's love language, then he could get on the same page and that communication could flow. So that's very important that you know yourself as a person, what your love language is, and then you know that person also that you're trying to communicate to. I know my wife, it's one of those things with the physical touch. And this doesn't just mean like in a sexual nature, but being there, letting her know. Mine is words of affirmation. I like to give positive words of affirmation. Oh, Renee, you're a fantastic cook. And she really is. I'm not just, you guys have to come over sometime for dinner.
That's an invitation.
Open invitation.
Well,
Get the calendar. Get the calendar out.
But yeah, learning that love language that she has, and then being able to, you know, make sure that you give that physical touch to that person and letting them know. She also likes gifts, so it may accompany that physical touch.
I think every woman has accepted a gift. You know, Victor, and something you said, it's interesting, as my wife and I are very different in this. And I have to be intentional to show her what is an expression of love to
Right.
her. For her, it is acts of service.
Okay.
So when I do something at the house that just minimizes what she has to do,
Right, right.
that is a tremendous amount of love.
Absolutely.
For me, I'm a words of affirmation person. And it's interesting, my wife, if I give her words of affirmation, she could care less. It's interesting how much that matters to me.
Sure.
And it's not that she doesn't care what I think or what I have to say, but it really has minimal impact when I say, hey, you did a great job on this, that you were phenomenal on this project, or whatever you did. It really, minimal impact. Now, if I do the dishes, significant impact. It's just crazy, but the love language, understanding the love languages can really impact and deepen relationships with spouses, with kids, and so on and so
But
forth.
let me bootstrap off that, because as husband and wife, and you have children, that being able to perform that service gives her comfort that, God forbid, she's ill or something, she knows you're capable of taking care of those. There's a comfort that lies inside of that you can provide for your children. And so that acts of service, you know, it really goes a long way with letting the women know, my husband can provide. You know, God forbid I'm laying in the bed and that's it. When my wife is down, she knows I can cook and I'll take care of those things around the house. And that gives them peace of mind as well.
You know, we'll let these guys
Absolutely.
talk here in a second. But so here's the downside. Just the example. Let's say I do the dishes. As a words of affirmation person, I need her to recognize that I did the dishes.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I got you.
Because if she doesn't say thank you and recognize I did the dishes, I'm like, Well, you're not showing love to me. I just showed you. It's crazy how the enemy can use that, and like after you just did something as an expression of love,
Right.
now you like want your expression back at you. Anyway,
Well,
maybe that's just my house.
After the show,
No,
she'll
it's
know
not
your
just
love
your house.
language.
That is, in my opinion, that's kind of across the board. My wife got sick the other day, and
Right.
one of the things that she always tells me is, I have those words of affirmation all the time for her. She's like, I want action. I don't want words. I want that. So when she got sick the other day, I thought, this is it. I mean, because I've been waiting to prove to her I'm going to take care of her after 30 years. So I just went through the house, grabbed all the blankets. She got sick, and I knew she was sick. And I'm thinking, I don't want to get sick, and I know she'll appreciate this. So I grabbed all the laundry, the bed sheets, everything. Spent 3 days cleaning the house, washing everything. Then I got sick. But the point was, she did recognize it, and she did appreciate it. So let me ask you this. A 4-year-old child can easily show affirmation. They can grab your leg and tell you, they want to cling to you. As for me, anyways, as my boys became teenagers, I didn't stop hugging them. I don't care if we were at a wrestling match, football match, whatever. That's my son. You're getting that hug. How can we? I do know some teenagers. Jackson, for one, doesn't like to be hugged, but I love that. I hug him every chance I get.
Jackson's my boy.
But I like that. I like to be able to get a younger guy or a teen and just be able to say, hey, listen, it's cool to be hugged by somebody else. So what's your answer or solution to that as they do become teenagers? They do kind of get a little too cool. I met my kids know you're never going to be too cool for your dad to hug you. What was your response to that?
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head there. A lot of teenagers, they're going through this time in their life in which they're trying to figure out themselves. They're trying to figure out where they fit into the world, but yet they still crave that. Even though they may not voice it or express it the way we would anticipate or want them to do that, they still want that. I know from my own personal experience, I wanted my dad there. I mean, a lot of teenagers say, I don't want my parents around, but deep down inside, I think they do. I think they really do, and they're trying to be cool. They're trying to fit in, and so they want to be like everyone else. But I think deep down inside, they still want that demonstration of love that's given to them by their parents.
My one boy DJ is 33. He was doing another project for his mother-in-law. I ran into him at Lowe's. First thing I did was hug him. It's like, that's my boy, man. What's up, dude? I will never stop hugging him. I'll never stop telling him I love him.
There you go. Yeah. Especially in those teen years. They get around their peers and don't come to the high school hugging them like, Mom, what are you wearing? Dad, what do you have on? You're embarrassing me.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Here's some, from the perspective of Dr. Chapman's book, here's some information to develop your own love language. 1, examine your childhood. How your parents express love can translate how you express and receive love. 2, what is your first instinct when you want to show someone love? And 3, look at how you've been hurt in your past childhood. So going back to the first, examine your childhood, how your parents express love. Does that affect how you express love nowadays?
It has the potential to do that. Oftentimes we want to just revert back to what comes natural and what we've seen and what we've experienced. For me personally, though, because I've bought all in on the whole 5 love languages.
Right.
I do it and use it for my premarital counseling for young couples that are getting married. And so I know that intentionally I've got to think through it and try not to revert back, because it is easy to, follow just in the footsteps of your father and do those things. And so just being mindful and intentional. And I think what you guys were talking about here earlier, is you're loving your wife. As men who are followers of Christ, we are to love our wives how? As Christ loved the church.
That's right.
And think about the sacrifices that he made for the church and just all the ways in which he has demonstrated that amazing love for the church. And we're called to a high standard, right? To emulate that love and exhibit it to our spouses as men who follow after Christ. And so being intentional to make sure that we're doing that for them.
Throw this out to Brent. What is your first instinct when you want to show someone love?
I'm sorry, I like to hug them. I don't care who they are. It's just, the way that God operates in me. I think when you give you break that barrier of being too cool or too manly, just to be able to say, hey man, I love you, give them a hug. And you know, I remember when I first started saying I love you to people, and my wife was like, slow your roll with that. Like, no, like I love them in Christ. Like God has just developed that in my heart, and it comes off my tongue so easily, and it's so sincere. Like, man, it's like when you see people, you see differently when you realize we're all made in an image of God, regardless of our race, color, wherever background, wherever we come from, we're made in the image of God. And if we love God, we should love God's people.
Yeah.
Yeah. You know, Victor, it's interesting. My love language that shows expressions of love to me is words of affirmation, as I expressed. But I actually think my first instinct to show someone love, I did get from my father. And it's not words of affirmation, it's acts of service. My dad has always been a kind of guy that you look at someone, what do you need? What can I do? And in many ways, he's still that way. So for me, if I am getting to know someone, I'm thinking, what can I do for you? What can I do to help you, whatever? And my first instinct is to just say, okay, whatever you're working on, how can I help? How can I make what you're doing better? And I didn't really think about that until we started talking about this, about how my father has impacted how I show love. Because typically, for me, as words of affirmation, I just want to be commended and this and that. But I do that to others. I do that to others. But I do think my first instinct is to go down the road of what can I do for you, and I get that from my father.
That's
Your
real
father's
good.
a good man.
Yeah, I used to work with his father, highway department, and I can, agree. He was always that type of person, acts of kindness and always the same. But I'd love to continue this, but we have to wrap it up. We want to thank you for coming today.
Thank you, Pastor.
Thank you for joining us on this week's show of Man Up. Please tune in again next time.
Impact Productions, a multi-layer technology company providing on-site, online, and in-studio video services. Contact Impact Productions to capture your story.
Next time on Man Up, we'll have my friend Andre Holsey with us, and we'll discuss race.
So a cultural center in general takes the best parts of a nonprofit community center, which usually a local government puts together, and an entertainment space, and creates kind of a hybrid. In this case, our cultural center is a for-profit organization, but it's designed to provide resources and empower individuals and businesses in our community.
All that and more next time on Man Up.
When it's time for a new roof, Champion Roofing is your best choice. We're a certified award-winning roofing contractor, meaning your roof is done right the first time. Call today.
Champion Roofing, we're the solution.